Hello, and you are back in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. This is our 45th episode, and today we'll be discussing the lie of American democracy, Ubisoft's stance on game ownership, and SCOTUS being in on it. So, we're going to get right into this with American democracy. This is something that gets talked about a lot in general, and especially since we're in election season in New Hampshire primaries today, so you're going to hear politicians and the media talk about American democracy and how it must be upheld and how Donald Trump and all the evil Republicans are doing everything they can to undermine American democracy. And if only you vote for the blue guy, the Democrats, Joe Biden or whoever the hell is going to replace him, if they pull that one over on all of us, has to be voted for so we can uphold the long-standing, very precious institution of American democracy. That's all bullshit. America is not a democracy. It's never been a democracy. It was never intended to be a democracy. We were founded as a constitutional republic. That's why the Electoral College exists. That's why when the Constitution was originally written, American senators were never directly elected. That was passed as an amendment. I forget exactly which one, but that was around the turn of the last century. So it was the beginning of the 20th century when senators began to be directly elected. That was the case before that amendment was passed. Senators were passed by state legislators. They were chosen by state legislators, which of course led to cronyism and all these sorts of things. So the republic wasn't, perfect by any means. It was a very imperfect system, but it was a lot better than just two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. And that's American democracy, or any sort of democracy. So democracy is only going to be as good as the average voter is, and the average voter is a complete freaking idiot. And that is true basically any population. So you sit down, you have a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. That's your argument against democracy. That's a basic. I'm paraphrasing Winston Churchill, but that's the idea of it. And again, the people in charge know that they've democratized the election process in a lot of ways in this country, a good bit. But other countries are basically entirely democracies, and it's just basically appealing to the lowest common denominator, promising people free stuff, and just a system that fucks over 49% of people for the will of 51%. Of course, the numbers will change a little bit depending on how popular the current guy in charge is, but it's basically around there. So that's something I want you to keep in mind, especially as we are very solidly in election season. The New Hampshire primary is going on. And like I said, the media, politicians are going to be talking about American democracy and how important it is and how we must uphold it. Now, you have to go to the polls and do your part to be a participant in American democracy, because if they can keep you convinced that, one, voting is something you should do and it matters, then they can keep having you do it and engaging with that system and upholding the uniparty's state, whether this be the federal government, the state governments, and use that power, that monopoly on forced violence, ultimate decision making, to extract as much value from the population and this country, and use it to enrich the ruling class. So that's why American democracy gets peddled so hard onto people, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we're going to move into the next topic, and that's Ubisoft's stance on game ownership. So this was going around last week, maybe a little bit more, a little while ago, where a dev or someone in Ubisoft said that gamers have to get used to not owning games, and they're trying to push the subscription model on the people. And this has been the case. So every big company as a gaming subscription model. Ubisoft is like Ubisoft Plus, or whatever the hell it's called. EA's got a thing. You've got Xbox's Game Pass, which is actually a pretty good deal. You've got PlayStation, Plus, and all the free, quote unquote, free games. So basically trying to do what Netflix does with games is something that was been very much a try. It's been the trend. They want to basically have you not own games, run on the cloud, that you're paying a monthly fee to access, and then They can take it away from you at any time. They can update anything at any time as well. You can't mod the games. You can't really do anything unless the developers or really in this case the publishers want it to happen. And that's really a toxic thing. And it trickles out to everything else. So it's just emblematic of the WEF. You're going to own nothing and be happy, right? This is kind of conditioning people to be in that mindset, to get people away from like, oh, I buy the disc or I buy the cartridge on a system and I can play it offline. I can play it in Timbuktu if I can get a TV and a generator up there to charge my console and play it anywhere. As long as, I've got the means to, power something and I've got the cartridge and it works, then I can play it, right? That's not the thing. It's, you have to have an internet connection. It's got to be in date. It's got to be, you have to be allowed to play it, and it has to be something that's not verboten. So, this is a way to control content, to centralize things. Like I said, this trickles out to everything. This trickles out to the idea of owning a car, owning a home, owning, means of food production, owning anything, really. Even the clothes on your back is this whole thing where it's you're not going to own anything. And again, stuff like video games, are not the most important things in the world. They're inconsequential to most people's lives. If you lost the ability to play games, would it be a disappointment? For a lot of people, yes, but it's not like, oh, you can't own a car or you can't own your home anymore. And that's where the real concerning thing, and that's what's going to get a lot of people up in arms unless they slowly build up to the concept of not owning anything. And that's why they're going to start with games and movies and music and all these sorts of things where you get onto the subscription model. And it's not completely beneficial to have the ability to pay, a monthly fee, and you can listen to basically any song anywhere and not have to pay for the albums and all these sorts of things. And the same thing makes sense with stuff like Netflix and streaming and all these sorts of things. So they have their benefits, they have their place, they have their relevancy in the consumer's life, but the idea is to get people used to not owning stuff. And they're starting with the stuff that's inconsequential, that's not too important, and then they're going to build up to the important stuff like cars and homes and food and clothing and all those sorts of things that you won't be allowed to own. You'll have to pay a subscription to get X amount of clothes that you can own or X amount of food you can get, basically. And that, like I said, that's building up to it. So I think, Ubisoft's stance on game ownership is emblematic of the WEF agenda that's being pushed on us. Of course, that's a bit tinfoil hat of me, but that's how I feel. And we're going to head into the last topic. And if you're still with me, thank you. Do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, follow, do all that good stuff, whatever platform you're listening or watching this on. Appreciate it very much. And we're going to move on to SCOTUS being in on it. And what do I mean being in on it? Statism. So SCOTUS is very much backing the federal government in this little showdown, this spat that's going on between the federal government and the state of Texas. So the state of Texas wants to enforce the border and prevent the migrants from coming into the border. They put up razor wire. Of course, the feds don't want that. They want to have people... basically wanted to have control of the border and to let it be a completely porous border. Let basically anyone come into it and call everyone who isn't on board with this a racist. Basically, that's what their plan is. Of course, they're never going to say that, but that's basically what they want to do. And the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, is on the side of the federal government because they made the decision to say, hey, the feds can come in and cut the razor wire that the state National Guard or whoever, was doing it for Texas, that razor wire, they can cut it. And of course, Texas is saying we're not going to back down. So this could be a hot conflict. And I was talking with Doc. We film Hump Day Potpourri on Sundays. It goes up on Wednesday. I'm not sure if this was in the show or something we were talking about, but all it takes, and this is on either side, one scrappy kid in the National Guard accidentally pulls a trigger at one of the, Federal Border Patrol agents, and you've got a hot conflict. And then that trickles down to a general hot conflict, especially with the election on the corner. So it's definitely a very concerning thing. But of course, the Supreme Court is a institution that's going to empower the federal government basically at every turn that they can for the important stuff. I don't know. Some stuff is a bit odd. Well, these decisions that they make, of course, something like Roe v. Wade gave, abortion rights, kick that back to the states. That was a bit odd, but of course you could make the argument that was meant to destabilize the country by making abortion even more of an issue, and thus allowing the federal government and states in general to get more power over people because they're arguing about abortion, all these sorts of things. So you can make that argument there. But in general, Supreme Court of the United States isn't this institution that cares about the Constitution. The federal government, all three branches, they took the Constitution and they wiped their asses with it generations ago. If you are like, I don't know, basically anyone who's been alive, anyone who's alive now was not alive at the time when this country stood by the Constitution, in my mind. Probably since, I don't know, probably after World War II, I would say, when the three-letter agencies were founded and started really doing stuff. You could also make the argument when the FED was founded in 1913 as well, and income tax was implemented. You make that argument as well. Of course, even though it was amended, but going to the spiritual, not spiritual, but the original intentions of the founding fathers, what they wanted this country to be and how they wanted it to be structured, is not what this country is today in terms of the taxation, in terms of the culture, in terms of the way the population is. We're weak, fat, and lazy and dependent on the state when we were supposed to be basically a decentralized network of small farmers in local communities that would collaborate together to defend against larger intrusions, being these, foreign, threats that we might have to deal with. And that's why we would have the militia and a standing army. Articles of Confederation was the original thing, and then the Articles of Confederation were deemed to be not have a federal government that was strong enough, so we had to have a stronger federal government, and that just enriched itself to be the behemoth of an institution that it is today, which is very unfortunate. And the Supreme Court of the United States is definitely part of that behemoth in this recent ruling, saying that Texas can't enforce its own border is basically part of that. And I think with that, I'm going to leave it here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back on Thursday with episode 36, and we're going into the outro now. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack. And be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.